just going to show you what it looks like and some options you have. So, okay, so a basic box. And I don't want to say basic. One of the reasons why I don't normally do these as a beginning project for beginning ceramic students is I find that we don't do a great job at it. And we should do better. So I made this 2 days ago, yesterday morning, and it's just been sitting in there. I sealed it all the way up. Now I could pick any side now and cut a lid on it. It wouldn't matter, right? You can come in before you cut the lid and you can start to draw. So I'm just going to create just an area that wraps around. That's going to give me my sections or segments. You can add things to it, so score and slip onto it. You ever do that drawing game where one side somebody does and another side somebody does, and you don't see the other side until you open it up? No? Yes? That's okay. They don't tell you that until 11th grade. And then whatever from there. There's plenty of things I can do. I did want to show you this real quick. If I wanted to not cut everything out and just have it be a decorative box, I would come in and let's say my lid is going to be like that. I would take this, cut out a piece of clay over here, and then I would come in here and find one that sits like that, and that would be my hole, right? Because it's going to have that gallery going out, and I'm going to have a hole, and then I'm going to find a smaller one, and that's going to be attached and go down. That's the size that's going to go down. Or you can just take these and just create patterns and lines and whatnot. We're not going to stress too much about it. As you're doing stuff, make sure that you have sketches. Make sure you ask questions. Just going to grab this. You can plan this out by sketching it out. Again, we're not just going to cut straight across. We're going to have some that drop down. I'm not a big fan of triangles or points because they chip. I am a fan of things that are a little rounder, and I'm just going to come in here, up and down. This shape can go along with our design. It doesn't have to. So like this could come in here. I follow that down. And then I usually do one that is pretty distinct, that is the side it goes on. So that we don't have to think about where it goes. And then we're just gonna gently cut all the way through. tiny bit wet. All right, so now we got that. So do you see how that's gonna fit? We're gonna clean that up. Come in here, add coils on the inside. I'm not gonna spend the time to do that, just to make it look real nice. Get that line back up. Once you cut it, if you don't add water to it, it won't stick together. But if you were to add water to it and then put it down, it'll try to stick together. So be mindful of that. And then you don't have to have a knob on these, but I would recommend you do some sort of a decorative knob. Okay, it's pretty simple. Making the box. Here's a variation on that uses a curve and not the same size walls. Okay, and all I did was cut out that curve twice with the angles going in, and then just cut 2 pieces straight up and down where the curves start with the angles going in, and then we can come in and cut that. Basic. Any questions there? I think you got that. Okay, now we're gonna do throne pieces. Oh, will you grab me like 2 calipers? So I have my clay. Yep. Well, the rounder ones, they have the grip. Yeah, like the one in your left hand. I'm going to use bats today, but the only thing you're going to use bats for are lids. Okay, so I'm just going to use bats just to make my life a little bit easier today. So we're going to throw that on there. Okay, and we're just going to start with a basic form. I'm not going to go too wide. I'm just going to kind of go up with a little bit of curve to it. Can you see that on the screen pretty well? When you're doing this and you start to do a little bit more clay, hit the top first and then come down to the bottom. You're going to cone that up, cone it down. Sometimes with bats you get a little bit of a wobble. It's not the clay. And all you need to do as you're hitting that wobble is you slowly release. If it still looks centered, then you're centered. You can also get the little lug nuts and tighten them down. I don't want to do that. There's other ways you can fix that. All right, we're going to open this. One of the problems with bats, if you're doing a lot of clay, if you have a lot of clay and you're trying to lift up, you tend to lift the bat up as well. So we're going to open that. When we do a lidded container, we need to leave enough clay at the top for a flange and a gallery. And again, on your papers, there's a whole bunch of options. Not every pot has a flange or a gallery. Not every pot or lid has a flange or a gallery. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So, who's planning on throwing? Okay, pick one that's on there and come show it to me so I can see. Just somebody grab one of the pots that's on your paper so I can kind of mimic that. On any of the 4 papers. So those are the lids. Which pot are you thinking?
Well, you could just do that. No?
Just do that? Okay. So, yeah. So what we're going to do on this one, the pot itself is not going to have a gallery. It is going to have a small flange. So it's going to come down, and then I'm going to balloon my pot out with that shoulder. Okay, we get the height, then we rivet. And then I'm going to shape it. Now I have to think, where do I want my lid to be? If this is some sort of something you're going to reach into, you got to make sure that right now your hand has plenty of room to get in there. Because it has to go in there, grab your cookie, and come out full. So it can't be tight now. Does that make sense? So if it is truly a cookie jar. But we're going to make this slightly more decorative. So I'm just going to collar that in like so. That's also going to give me where my shoulder is going to be. I'm going to add a little bit of a curve here. Doesn't take a whole lot. Make sure there's water on the inside. Slow your wheel down. Push out. And then while you're moving back in, grab that just a little bit. And that just continues that nice curve. You don't have to do that right then. You can come back and do it in a minute. But I like to start to move out and then come in. It gives it a nice S curve. I'm going to use the flat part of my metal rib on the outside. It's going to compress it, it's going to clean it up, and it's going to show me its true shape. And if I want to fix that, now's a good time. So I'm going to come in here and just lift up a little bit because I want it to be a little bit rounder as it moves up. When I did that, I pushed this out. Now, let's talk about that for a second. This right here, how it tapers in, is a perfect place for a bowl to sit. So a lid, you throw it as a bowl and it just sits in there. And as long as you make it just smaller than the lip, it's gonna sit and hold tight. And neither one of those is gonna have a flange. This is gonna be like a tapered gallery. And so, I don't wanna grab someone's piece, but it would just sit. And you can make that a little bit wider. You could also make it flatter, but we're gonna bring this in. This. Show me that picture again. Sweet. Okay. So I'm gonna make a lid that goes down here and out here. So it has a flange that goes down, and then the gallery is gonna rest right on that lip, okay? Another option you could do is just make a bowl that sits over the whole thing. So it would sit, and I'll make a little mark here, it would come and rest right down there. And that's a perfectly good one as well. Let's clean up the bottom just a tiny bit, and then we're gonna measure. Now, you can use a knife, you can use a ruler, you can use some calipers. If someone's using calipers, do not reach across the wheels and grab their calipers. They've taken a measurement and you've got to leave it at that. If you want to do a production of things, I would recommend that you both measure with the calipers and measure with a ruler. And you would come in here with the ruler and go, that's 3 1/4 inches wide on the inside and 3 1/2 on the outside. That way you can reproduce a lid without your pot even being there, okay? Or with your pot being all the way fired. And potters do that. If they make lidded containers, they try to make things almost identical, so their openings are always 3.5, so that they know if somebody breaks a lid at home and they bought one, they can order something from them at that size and it'll probably fit. I'm not so worried that you get there. So we're gonna come in here. Oh, like those. And we're just gonna measure what we think is straight across. And I'm just measuring from the opening to the opening. Okay, so we've got that. And we're gonna take this off. Set that aside. As I'm doing this, any questions? Comments, concerns?
How often do you clean the bats?
The bats?
Yeah.
They should be cleaned when you're done using them. My favorite time to clean the bats are when they're just leather hard and you just take a scraper and just peel it off. Is my wire tool up there? We just give it a good fling. Okay, I don't need a lot of clay for this. I'm just gonna grab a little bit, and if you can't see, this is the measurement. And if I just start with that, I should be good. Now I'm gonna throw a bowl. And when I throw a bowl, then I'm gonna create the gallery and the flange. So I'll get this basically centered. Okay, and then I'll take my measurement and go, okay, that's about where I need to be. So I need to open it. I need to keep my rim thick. Okay, by thick I mean 1/2 inch by 3/8 maybe. I'm gonna open that there. And one of the fun things about this, by opening it, I'm almost automatically making that flange. Do you see that? And that flange needs to come out to about there. So we're gonna push down just a tiny bit. And then pull this out. I'm just leaving this finger pretty close to where I want it. This outside is what's gonna go inside my pot. Come in here, there's a decent amount of space, but remember when I talked about tapering it? Right here, it's more space, but when I get where it's gonna rest, do you see how there's a lot of clay down there? It tapers like that, just a little bit. And so I want it just like that. I want it to taper. That way when I put the lid in, it can kind of rock into place. I want this round. There are times where we want it square, but I want it round because my rim is round. I want it to sit nice and round in there. I could have left this bottom thicker and trimmed a knob into it. Trim that a little bit. And I'm going to clean it up here in a second, but before I do that, just double check all my measurements. I think I want this out just a tiny bit more. Yeah, that'll work. Clean it up. So my options on glazing this are I can glaze everything and wipe off the bottom here so it sits, or I can wipe off all of this and the rim of my pot and fire them together. Either way, when you get closer to glazing, let me know and we can talk about what it is you need to do. You hand me my towel. I kicked it out of the way when I moved this. So thank you. All right, so we have our piece there. And it's going to sit just like that, okay? And because they're made at the same time, they're going to dry at the same rate. Now, you shouldn't put it on there right now because it's gonna be a pain to get it off and I'm gonna kind of mess it up, but it's okay. We'll just, no, that didn't work. We'll call it an abstract lid.
An inverted knob.
An inverted knob. It'll still work. I'm gonna set that next to it. We'll alter that. We'll make that better, maybe. Okay, I'm gonna take the next piece. Is there another one you want me to show you real quick? I'm just gonna do a bowl that goes on that same one, but since I sort of messed it up, but my measurement now is the outside. So the bowl's gonna land right there. So that's my measurement. And then I'm gonna show you one where we create a gallery. That's important. Okay, I get it centered. I'm gonna just check to see where I need to go to. That mark right there is the inside of my bowl. Okay, so you gotta remember that. You also have to remember the height. So on our pot, how far does it have to go down? I'm gonna have plenty of clay. I'm gonna make this thick so that I can trim a knob into it. Pull this out. I would recommend for every pot you make, you try making 2 or 3 or 4 lids. You just get better at it, you'll be more comfortable making them. You'll be able to experiment a little bit. Once you make one like this, it's not that hard to just make another one that's similar. Okay, that's a bowl. And I measured. The measurements I'm looking for is that it's going to fit over the top. Yep, that'll work. It's tapering in here, but remember my pot tapers in just a little bit. So it's okay. You can do multiple measurements as you go down just to make sure that that transition's good. You don't have to, you can just eyeball it. When you trim this or clean it up, you can also come in and fix some of those things if you've left your stuff a little thicker. If you have a really thin rim, you're not going to be able to trim that to fit because it's going to break. So make sure you leave things just a little bit thicker. So that's a nice bowl. And just so you can see this, it's just going to drop straight down and land right there. And Maybe. Well, you could do that. But see, this one I'm gonna be able to trim all this clay up, and I could trim it so it goes in and up. It could just round out. I'll put some sort of a knob on it. There's all kinds of
you
cool
made the
stuff.
bottom super thick just so you could trim a knob into it.
Yeah, or if I don't trim a knob, I can trim it and still throw a knob onto it. If you make it thin, you're not gonna be able to throw a knob onto it. So, let's set that aside. And do it. So, this next one, let me see that top paper right there. So if you look on the back row of this, okay, each one of those pots has some sort of a gallery and a flange, and then the lids themselves are going to be slightly different. So I'm going to start with just creating the gallery on the pot, and then I'll throw a couple of different lids that fit those. So we're going to take this. So as for surface technique, I'd love for you to use some of the things you've been doing and learning, but I'm only going to be talking about those 3 things as we listed them off. So variation, or I wrote variety. And like the segments or sections. Okay, I'm gonna open this, and we're just gonna make this a canister. So this is going to be a cookie jar. This is going to be a flour container. You could make this into a fermentation pot. Any number of things like that. If the lid doesn't work, then you can make it into a utensil holder or a flower pot. Okay, if you're making this into a flour container or a sugar container, you need to be able to dip some sort of a cup in there, right? So it needs to be a decent width, not super wide, but just a little bit. And then as we look at that, the first one is just a tapered. So let me rib this real quick. So as we get up there, the first one just tapers like that. And it's because the way they've thrown it, it's just gonna kind of go in and settle into place, okay? But as we look at the second one's the same, the third one, and the fourth and the fifth up in the top row are going to be, there's gonna be more of an angle or a gallery. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can bend out a little bit, but this is how I like to do mine. So as a beginner, you're going to take a needle tool and you're going to split this nearly in half, just so you can see the line, okay? And that line is going to be a split. My rim might be a tiny bit thin, but it'll be okay. And then you can use your fingers to do this, but I'm going to use the end of my wood rib, and I'm just going to come in here and just slowly press down. Supporting on the outside. Now, that's where everything's gonna sit, and then this here, this outside flange, I'm just gonna clean it up, but we remember we want it to taper just a little bit so that our piece can fall down into it, okay? Now, depending on what we're doing for our project. Let me clean up the bottom here. Maybe I'll clean up the bottom here. There we go. If I was throwing a bowl, so it's gonna come out like this, I would just measure that line and make sure my bowl barely fits inside of that, and then whatever height I want to roll that, and it'll just sit there. And because it's contained on both sides, it's not gonna wobble out. If I was throwing a flat piece, I could do the same measurement, and we'll actually do that. So, let's do this. I'm gonna take this off here. Oh, I didn't measure it. Measure it. Okay. And then we're gonna put another bat on. I would recommend, if you are a little apprehensive about this, to just start with small ones and just play around with little tiny just jars. And try not to go too big. You're gonna have the option of picking your own projects after spring break, at least partly. And if you want to continue doing more lidded containers, you can. We'll have a few options for you. So, which one am I making? I'm making a flat piece, and I'm gonna throw a knob on right now. And so it's gonna be flat, and then I'm gonna create a knob. There's a couple ways to do that. The first thing we do now, if I'm going to throw a flat piece, I'm going to take my measurement, and I'm actually going to push this further out, then I'm going to trim it into that size. So it's like the exact size I want. So what I mean by that, I need all this clay up here for the knob, so I'm just going to push down here, and I don't want it to be super thin. I'm going to push that out. And I'm going to come back and check my measurement. Okay, do you see how that's a little wider than my measurement? Okay, so that's good. So that when I go to trim it, I can trim that so it fits super nice right in there. Now the knob. This knob is super thick. There's a couple things. If I want a big, meaty knob, I'm going to open it all the way to the bottom so that there's a hole coming up. And I can push all the way down, and then I can form a knob. If I want just a smaller knob, I'm going to take some of this clay off. I want to do a nice, meaty, decorative knob. So I'm going to push all the way down to the bottom. Lift that up. And then I'm going to, another option is to not close the top, but I am going to close the top. So we're going to come in here, push out, go back in. Just make a nice, meaty, decorative top. Rib that. Close that off.
What about here then, like in trap?
So it's all the way down to the bottom and through, so there's no trapped air. So when I cut this, there will be a hole at the bottom.
Oh,
And that's just a decorative thing. If I didn't go all the way through, I could just go and poke a hole in the bottom, and that'll be fine too. Most of my lidded containers are gonna be like teapots, or they're gonna just be decorative. And so I don't have a problem with it just being big and bold and a little bit whatever. Looks like there's a different type of clay in there. It's kind of cool. Remember, it's going to shrink a little bit. So my hand right now, it's a little bit big, but I'll be able to pick that up fairly easily. Okay, and then just so you can see this, well, no. If I cut this off right now and lift it up, it's gonna flop, it's gonna start to sag, so I'm not gonna do that. I am going to put a small mark there. So I'm barely gonna even have to measure when I go to trim this up. It's gonna sit on the bat. And I'm gonna cut it right. No, I'm not gonna cut it because it's gonna sit on the bat. All right, so that's gonna fit like that. And then we're gonna do another one. And this one, we're gonna create a bowl. It's gonna be like the one on the far right of that back. And it's gonna be, well, that sucks. All right, what was I telling you? Oh, a bowl. Today's the only day I'm doing demos on this. I want you to start, and then if you need like an individual demo, I can hurry and do that. But I want you to kind of show me and tell me what you want to accomplish in that demo and what you've tried when you've done it. And this goes for hand building too. You should have enough information that you can conceptualize some of it. Okay, make sure your rim is going to be thick. And there's two measurements on this one. We have this outside rim right there. And then I have the inside as well, because I want the flange to go down. And this is gonna be one that's more something you'd seal in about there. So if you were making something to actually seal, there's a couple of ways to do it. I'm not gonna show you a fermentation pot. But they would make it so that had a U, and then they would fill it with water, and they would put like a bowl in that water, and that water would seal. They would also put wax around it so that it seals up completely and no air gets in or out. Alright, so we've got the outside measurement, which is where the gallery, the extended gallery goes, way out there. And then you have the flange. Okay, so this is the outside. So I'm going to create a bowl. I'm going to leave it a little thick again, so I can throw a knob onto it, I can trim a knob into it, kind of whatever. A nice thick rim there. Okay, so that is the side of my piece. I can do it right on right now, or I can trim it up later. Make this right on. Oh, and the one measurement I didn't show you, you have to know from this corner to where it drops in, you have to know that width, because you need to measure over so that that flange drops straight down or close to it. I'm going to eyeball it and then come in and play around with that. So I'm just going to come here, push down. Again, you can split that if you want with your needle tool. And then on this inside flange, I'm going to taper it. So where it's connected to the bowl, it's wider, but it's going to taper in like this. I'm just going to come in here. Taper that in just a little bit. There's nothing better than a really, really, really good fitting lid. Satisfies your life. Hey, did you want a piece of pie?
Oh, that's delightful. Imagine.
What are you, yeah, what are you making?
Nothing.
Sit and watch.
Well,
It's delightful. Oh my goodness. Oh, that was so bad.
Okay, what kind of questions do you have? Thoughts, comments, concerns? What was my, did you have your hand up? What was my recommendation for what you do this weekend? Watch some videos. This is intro. Hopefully you have a good idea of where you want to go, so that when you show up on, what is today, Thursday? Sorry. On Monday, when you show up on Monday, I don't even want to talk. We'll do our bell work and you can just jump in. That's what I want to see, you jumping right in. And once you jump in, then you can start asking questions if you need to. Cut that. What was that?
You don't have much time to do anything today?
No, you don't. So, and then that'll flip over. I'm not gonna do that because I'll ruin that again. Any questions? You do have time today